In the far-off year of 3020, as marked by Earth's calendar, a 21-year-old man named Fan navigated a world still divided by social classes. He earned his living as a programmer at technology company. As he sat at his laptop late one night, he sensed the urgency to resolve one final bug in his code before calling it a night. However, overwhelming fatigue soon washed over him, prompting him to abandon the task and head to bed. He had just started to complete his thought when he suddenly slumped onto his desk, his head resting heavily on his laptop, slipping into a deep slumber. In the stillness of the night, he suddenly awoke, his eyes drawn to a peculiar glow illuminating the sky outside his window. The following morning, Fan jolted awake, suddenly aware that he had overslept for work. He hurriedly started gathering his belongings, picking up his computer mouse, the device, and his mobile phone. Just as he was about to leave, he realized he nearly overlooked the charger and turned back to retrieve it. In an effort to be more efficient, he chose to simply wash his face and forego taking a shower. As he washed his hands, a strange black mark emerged on his palm, gradually seeming to sink into his skin. Fan sprinted out of his home and flagged down a taxi. Once he climbed inside, he instructed the driver to take him to technology company, urging him to speed up since he was running extremely late for his meeting. Unfortunately for him, the car became ensnared in a thick traffic jam. As Fan sat there, he began to feel a wave of drowsiness wash over him once more, attributing it to the late night he had endured the evening before. Fan drifted into a profound slumber, and soon he found himself enveloped in an unusual dream, suspended in an expansive, star-filled cosmos. Rocks began to converge around him, gradually shaping into a massive sphere. He stood in awe as he observed the rocks transform into a fully formed planet. As if conjured from thin air, droplets of water started to gather and gradually transformed into a sprawling ocean that spread across the surface of the newly formed planet. A thick forest materialized before him, leading him to ponder the peculiar nature of this dream. While strolling through the forest, he noticed a potted plant that seemed oddly recognizable. A massive, fearsome red beetle suddenly emerged right in front of him. Fan stirred awake from his unsettling dream, startled by the taxi driver's voice announcing their arrival at the designated spot. The driver inquired whether Fan preferred to settle the fare in cash or via QR code. At that moment, Fan came to the realization that everything he had experienced was merely a dream. He stepped out of the car in front of the technology company building. The driver couldn't help but make a sarcastic remark about how today's youth tend to stay up far too late immersed in their video games. Upon stepping into his boss's office, he found himself confronted by the head of the research department, whose anger was palpable. Persisted in his scolding, pointing fingers at Fan for neglecting the company's regulations. He advised him against attempting to defend his role, stating that the company simply could not sustain the employment of someone deemed as ineffective as he was. He further suggested that if he was unwilling to contribute, he should gather his belongings and depart. Fan kept his composure as he informed them that he had reached his destination precisely at 9 in the morning, just as planned. The manager's frustration grew even more as he shouted at Fan, questioning whether he was defying authority. He made it clear that in this department, his word was absolute. He pointed out that he had instructed Fan the previous Friday to arrive 30 minutes earlier than the official start time. Concluding his outburst, he expressed his disappointment that today's youth seemed to lack an understanding of how to adhere to rules. In that instant, Fan's eyes glowed a vivid red as haunting images of the terrifying beetles from his dream flickered before him. The manager continued to shout, making it clear that he had the power to dismiss him with just one word. Fan interjected with a sense of calm and confidence, revealing his decision to resign. The manager was taken aback by the unforeseen response, and with a hint of disdain, inquired how he could be so narrow-minded as to resign over just a few remarks. He then taunted him, questioning whether he believed he would discover another company willing to offer him the same pay. Fan resolutely affirmed his choice, informing him that he was indeed stepping down and would be handing in his resignation letter later. Fan departed, leaving his manager in a daze as he puffed on his cigar, struggling to comprehend the seriousness of his decision to leave, especially since he had already written a resignation letter. Fan, having declared his resignation, turned to his manager. with an icy demeanor, and inquired about when he could visit the finance department to finalize his salary. The manager responded to the question with a touch of sarcasm, inquiring about which salary was being referenced. Fan firmly believed that even though he had resigned, he was still owed the salary for the previous month, which had not yet been paid to him. The manager's face twisted in fury as he heard the news, and in a fit of rage, he swept the papers from his desk. He informed Fan that it was he who had chosen to resign, not the other way around, implying that Fan was responsible for paying a penalty to the company for breaking his contract. With a harsh tone, he warned Fan that he would summon security if he didn't exit the office at once. In that instant, Fan experienced a wave of defeat as he recalled the contract he had signed, which was riddled with manipulative and misleading clauses crafted specifically to ensnare him. A figure who had served as a mentor in his life exploited the trust of the recent graduates. He persuaded the young man to sign a contract that was clearly unjust, all while assuring him that he would support his career development. Fan rose to his feet once more, and the manager looked at him with disdain, inquiring about his desires. Fan responded with a resolute tone, expressing his desire for the salary from the previous month and indicating that he should not have to say it again. The manager was incensed by the defiance, labeling him a rebel for flouting the rules, and once more he issued a stern warning about involving security. Before the manager had a chance to react, Fan darted forward with incredible speed, seizing him by the neck and causing his glasses to go flying. The manager, gripped by fear, found himself struggling to breathe as he pleaded with Fan to cease his actions, assuring him that he would fulfill his demands. In that instant, a fierce impulse overwhelmed Fan, and a dark voice resonated in his thoughts, compelling him to eliminate his manager. The wish he harbored aligned with the vision of the enormous beetle from his dream, intensifying the urge for violence within him. However, within him, his virtuous self, ensnared in the peculiar realm he had glimpsed in his dream, was crying out, desperately attempting to prevent his actions. The side representing justice raised their voices passionately, asserting that taking a life is a grave offense, and pleaded with him to cease his actions. Fan abruptly snapped back to reality, as though emerging from a deep trance, and let go of his manager, who collapsed to the ground, coughing harshly. The frightened manager scrambled toward his safe, opened it with trembling hands, and removed all the cash within. With desperation in his voice, he pleaded with Fan to take the money and spare him. Fan, now composed, decided to take just a portion of his monthly earnings, and informed the manager that he could retain the remainder. Once Fan had departed, the manager remained on the floor, retrieving his phone to dial an unfamiliar number. With a voice quaking from fear, he informed the individual on the other end of the line, whom he referred to as Chief, that he believed he had discovered a deviant. Fan sat on the steps of a building, feeling utterly drained and fatigued. Thoughts swirled in his mind as he pondered the events that had transformed him into someone entirely new. As he pondered, his gaze fell upon the dark mark on his palm, sparking curiosity about where it had come from. As Fan stepped inside his home, he realized that the plant he had been nurturing was no longer in its usual place. He struggled to piece together the events that had unfolded, and was suddenly reminded of a strange light that had shone from outside, moments before he fell into darkness. He examined his body once more, and noticed that the only change was the enigmatic black mark on his palm. He directed his full attention toward it immediately. He experienced a sensation akin to being whisked away to an alternate reality, where he uncovered a sandbox-like realm nestled within himself. Fan suddenly came to the understanding that what he had witnessed earlier that morning was not merely a figment of his imagination. The internal world surrounding him was, in fact, a consequence of his absorption of the mysterious black light. To his surprise, the plant that had vanished from his home suddenly reappeared right in front of him. He concluded that this world consisted of the items consumed by the enigmatic black light. Deep within him, he sensed a profound message about his emerging power to manipulate this reality. Within the depths of his mind, Fan came to the astonishing realization that he held the power to manipulate this inner realm at his discretion. With a simple gesture of his hand, he cleaved the landmass in half, creating two towering cliffs that stood on either side of a flowing river. He then spotted a creature in the forest and recognized it as the same one he had encountered earlier that morning. The creature was a rhinoceros beetle. In the real world, Fan gazed at the dark stain on his hand, pondering whether this shadowy glow was the cause of his earlier loss of self-control. He realized that he had not only inherited the fierce spirit of the beetles, but also some of their characteristics. He sensed that his physical strength had been greatly amplified. The rhinoceros beetle resembled a tank in the realm of insects. It not only held incredible strength. The creature possessed an exceptionally tough shell and a formidable horn. Fan contemplated the possibility that if the could successfully channel these attributes into his body, any attacker who aimed for his forehead would experience a backlash of damage. He recalled the moment he had effortlessly lifted his manager with a single hand and understood that the black light had amplified his strength. In his apartment, he noticed a spider perched on the edge of the window. He saw it as an ideal chance and resolved to discover what powers would come from absorbing the spider. With that thought in mind, he activated the black light in his palm and drew the spider into himself. The object was immediately sent into his inner realm. In that moment, the spider started its remarkable transformation. Fan observed tiny barbs beginning to emerge on his fingertips. He felt a wave of relief wash over him as he realized he had the ability to summon and dismiss the barbs whenever he wanted. He worried that otherwise, people might perceive him as a mutant or something similar. His train of thought was abruptly halted by a knock on the door. Fan contemplated who might be at the door, knocking at such a late hour. A voice called out from outside, revealing its affiliation with the Supernatural Investigation Bureau, and requested that he open the door to assist with their inquiry. Upon hearing the name of the Bureau, Fan felt a surge of shock. He understood that the Supernatural Investigation Bureau wasn't a covert group. Rather, it was a widely recognized organization, given the frequent occurrences of supernatural events. Despite the scant coverage in the news regarding their accomplishments, the organization enjoyed considerable recognition. Fan was anxious, worried that they had arrived to take him into custody. He concluded that pretending to be clueless was his most advantageous choice. Fan swung open the door, revealing 3 men dressed in formal attire. The man at the front took a step forward, revealing his identity as Officer Chase from the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. He displayed his identification badge and conveyed his desire for Fan to cooperate with them by answering a few questions. Officer Chase shared that they had gotten a report from the Area A Observatory regarding a strange black light that had descended in this area during the night. He inquired whether the individual had any information or insights concerning this peculiar light or its whereabouts. Fan came to the understanding that their presence was truly linked to the mysterious black light. The officer expressed his hope that Fan would share any information he possessed, enabling the Bureau to address any potential issues that could come up. Sticking to his strategy, Fan expressed his regrets and stated that he had been fast asleep during the night and had not witnessed anything. He then attempted to conclude the discussion by mentioning that he would be going to rest if there were no further matters to address. As he attempted to shut the door, Officer Chase intervened, cautioning him that the black light posed a significant danger. For his own safety, Officer Chase advised him to keep his distance from the area while they conducted a thorough investigation. Fan was taken aback, realizing that Officer Chase's grip was stronger than his own as he held the door in place. The officer adjusted his strategy and handed Fan his business card, encouraging him to reach out if he observed anything unusual or recalled any important details. Once the men from the Investigation Bureau departed, they extended their wishes for a pleasant evening to Fan. Fan shut the door, letting out a breath of relief as he did so. Fan's thoughts raced as he pondered the situation. He felt a sense of wonder at Officer Chase's skill in stopping him from shutting the door, despite the enhancements his own body had received from the black light. It dawned on Fan that this man must be what people referred to as a deviant. He examined the business card handed to him, taking in the words Supernatural Investigation Bureau Branch, and appreciated its stylish design. He settled into a chair and took a sip of water, making an effort to brush the issue aside. As he turned the card over, a message on the back caught him off guard, causing him to spit out his water in shock. The card declared that anyone who held it was now an honorary member of the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. A wave of anxiety washed over him as he contemplated the legality of such a procedure and the potential consequences if he chose not to accept their invitation. As the sleek black Mercedes glided down the rain-soaked street, one of the team members turned to his colleague, Chase, the team leader, and inquired whether he had sensed the powerful energy radiating from Fan. Chase navigated the road quietly, lost in his thoughts. The narrative described how, throughout centuries of exploring the mysteries of the world, humans had come across phenomena that explanation. Among these discoveries was the appearance of a unique group of individuals with extraordinary abilities, referred to as deviants. The deviants were classified into 4 primary categories, each determined by the nature of their abilities: natural type, beast type, trait type, and unique type. The Supernatural Investigation Bureau had been created with the specific purpose of addressing incidents instigated by these deviants while also keeping a close watch on them. Chase was reviewing an initial report on Fan, which noted that his abilities remained a mystery. It mentioned that his parents had passed away, described his demeanor as calm and reserved, and pointed out that his previous actions indicated he avoided trouble. In the back seat, the 2 other members were taken aback by what their leader had just said. The young man with spiky hair exclaimed in disbelief, questioning how Fan had already turned into a deviant. Chase reprimanded him, urging him to adopt a more professional demeanor and to keep his voice down. The young man with spiky hair confessed that he had not sensed any changes in Fan's energy. Fan's strength made him question whether it exceeded his own capacity to perceive it. His colleague, who wore glasses, clarified that the reality was quite the opposite. Fan's energy was so faint that it went unnoticed. The young man with spiky hair felt a surge of excitement as he complimented his colleague, who wore glasses and had the remarkable skill to sense energy fluctuations within a 20-kilometer radius. It dawned on him that this was the reason their leader had entrusted Fan with the card, and he couldn't help but admire the leader's choice. Chase inquired of his colleague, who wore glasses with 4 lenses, about his thoughts on what kind of deviant Fan might be. The colleague responded that he found it difficult to categorize Fan's type. He noted that, observing the fluctuations in his energy, he was convinced that Fan had only just begun to awaken his powers. Chase linked this to the black light event that had transpired the previous night, a connection that his colleague concurred with. 4 eyes disclosed that the night before, despite being over 30 kilometers away from where the had landed, he had sensed a tremendous surge of energy. The curiosity drove him to investigate further. Chase remarked that he was aware of the situation, and the intensity of that single glance had left his colleague's eyes deeply affected. The young man with spiky hair pondered the strange disappearance of the black light. Curiosity got the better of him, and he turned to his leader, inquiring whether he believed Fan would arrive for the scheduled meeting. In his apartment, Fan scoured the internet for details regarding the Supernatural Investigation Bureau and the process of joining, yet his efforts yielded no results. While he pondered the peculiar way they had gone about recruiting, he stumbled upon a concealed note on the business card. It instructed him to meet them at the bus destined for Route 11. The day after Fan had submitted his resignation, he received what seemed like a job offer. He made up his mind to go meet with them, convinced that understanding the situation was preferable to remaining uninformed. Fan hailed a taxi, but the driver appeared to be frightened and came to a sudden halt. Fan made an effort to capture the driver's focus, but he quickly realized that the man's soul seemed to be on the brink of escaping his body due to sheer terror. The driver collected himself and inquired of Fan the reason for his visit to such a foreboding location at such a late hour, cautioning him about the numerous accidents that had taken place there. Fan approached the terrified taxi driver with a fabricated story, stating that he was on his way back to his, and required a ride to the bus station for Route 11. The driver felt a surge of panic when he heard the name of the road. He informed Fan that it was out of the question, explaining that no bus had traveled that way in more than 10 years. As the driver's anxiety grew, Fan made an effort to reassure him, insisting that he was all right and capable of handling the situation independently. The frightened driver took off in a hurry, abandoning Fan and yelling that he didn't want to collect the fare, pleading with him not to follow. Fan remained by himself in the shadows, observing as the taxi vanished into the distance. He found himself compelled to continue on foot for the rest of the journey. After some time, he was fortunate enough to find a bicycle for rent, which allowed him to travel the surprisingly long distance more easily. At 11:30 that night, he reached the area, only to discover an abandoned bus stop awaiting him. Out of nowhere, a bus sliced through the downpour and came to a halt right in front of him. The 3 agents from the investigation bureau stepped off, with leader Chase leading the way alongside his 2 partners. The agents stood in anticipation, yet as the minutes ticked by, their optimism began to fade regarding his arrival. The agent with spiky hair turned to his leader, Chase, and expressed his concern that Fan was nowhere to be found. Chase found himself questioning whether he had already departed. Their colleague thought that Fan had become frightened and chosen to withdraw, while another person, Mo, remarked that anyone in their right mind would feel afraid in such a location at this hour of the night. His colleague nodded with enthusiasm, suggesting that if Fan struggled with such a straightforward issue, he would surely fail to meet the Bureau's evaluation standards. In that instant, Chase contemplated that Fan appeared to possess strong mental resilience, leading him to question if he had misjudged his capabilities. The standards for becoming a member of the Investigation Bureau were rigorous, demanding not just supernatural talents, but also considerable mental and emotional fortitude. Bringing Fan to a deserted bus station during the night served as the most straightforward evaluation he could receive. The young man with spiky hair broke into his leader's contemplation with a playful remark. He pointed out that he understood Chase's lofty expectations since he had personally invited Fan, yet he suggested that even the leader could occasionally miss the mark. He proposed that they should leave, confidently claiming that Fan was too frightened to join them. As they prepared to depart, a voice suddenly called out, inquiring about who had claimed to be afraid. Fan made his entrance, striding boldly through the pouring rain toward them. Chase looked at him in astonishment and inquired why he hadn't departed yet. With a calm demeanor, Fan responded, questioning the reason for leaving and suggesting that since he had traveled so far, it was wiser to discover what was happening. The group gathered at the deserted bus station, standing in a circle and facing one another. Upon Fan's arrival, Chase walked up to him, admiring his bravery. Fan astonished everyone when he revealed a toy gun he had concealed and aimed it at Chase. After a brief pause filled with surprise and disbelief, Chase erupted in laughter, causing his 2 colleagues to shift uncomfortably, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Chase acknowledged the challenge of trusting someone they had only met briefly. He admired Fan for his composure in the face of uncertainty and commended his bravery in venturing into the unknown, expressing his approval with a simple, "Well done." He confessed that during his own experience with the test in the past, fear had gripped him so tightly that he nearly fled. Chase glanced at Mo and inquired why he hadn't mentioned that Fan was already present. Mo's response was icy as he simply stated that Chase hadn't asked. Chase finally faced Fan with a smile, expressing his congratulations and declaring that Fan was now an official candidate for the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. Fan caught him off guard once more by revealing that he had not come to become a part of their organization. Chase inquired about Fan's reason for being there, and Fan replied that he was simply curious to observe the appearance of other deviants. Officer Chase noticed Fan's uncertainty and sought to convince him to join their ranks. He emphasized that Fan might not fully grasp the advantages the Bureau could provide or the influence his potential coworkers held. Chase emphasized his argument by waving his hand in a distinctive gesture. A strange power radiated from him, twisting and tearing a nearby metal sign from its place in the ground. Fan stared in disbelief at the spectacle, his mind racing with the thought that his abilities might resemble those of the fictional character Magneto. Chase wore a smile as he shared his thoughts, expressing a desire to possess the strength of Magneto. However, he acknowledged that his own powers were confined to effortlessly lifting items that weighed up to 50 kilograms. Fan then faced the agent with spiky hair and inquired about his unique ability. The agent confidently showcased his power by transforming his skin into steel, casually remarking that it was nothing special. Fan remarked with a hint of sarcasm that the ability appeared somewhat absurd, provoking the agent's ire. Fan shifted his focus to the final agent, Mo, and realized that had been observing him intently the entire time. From this, Fan accurately inferred that Mo's powers were likely connected to vision. Once everyone had shared their names, Chase suggested they head out together. Fan felt a wave of shock wash over him once more. They came to a halt in front of a simple building marked by a sign that said Noodle Shop. With a look of surprise, they inquired if this was truly their headquarters. Chase greeted him warmly, urging him to step inside without any reluctance. As Fan stepped inside, he found himself utterly astonished. Instead of a simple noodle shop, he discovered a vast, cutting-edge facility that was entirely different from what he had anticipated. Within the room, he discovered Chase sprawled out on the sofa. Meanwhile, the agent with spiky hair, donned in an apron, was getting ready to whip up a meal at his request. He had requested a bowl of noodles, mentioning that the doctor had recommended avoiding meat during the night. The agent's excitement bubbled over as they eagerly started to prepare the dough. Fan experienced a wave of exhaustion as he realized that this location held none of the esteemed qualities associated with a major organization. He pondered whether it was already too late for him to reconsider his decision. Chase inquired whether he felt let down. Fan expressed that his purpose for arriving in the middle of the night was not to observe them making noodles. From the kitchen, another agent called out, declaring that enjoying the noodles he had made was a stroke of good luck. Chase, speaking in a composed manner, pointed out that it was impossible to focus on their tasks without first having something to eat. Fan expressed doubt and inquired whether the whole organization was really made up of just the three of them. The other agent let out a sarcastic laugh at the thought, highlighting the overwhelming size of city and emphasizing that it would be impossible for just 3 people to handle it all. This realization brought a sense of relief to Fan. Chase cut him off, declaring that there were 6 members in total and gesturing toward Fan, who was identified as the 6th. Feeling exasperated, Fan insisted they cease their teasing and pressed them for the actual count of members. Chase responded with a serious tone, questioning whether he truly believed that deviance was a widespread occurrence. Fan felt a surge of surprise and inquired whether they were truly that uncommon. Chase clarified that if there were numerous deviants, they wouldn't be enlisting everyone they encountered. As they enjoyed their meal, Fan inquired about the other 2 members of their group. Chase had previously mentioned that there were 5 of them, but without his presence. Chase assured everyone that there was no hurry and that they would reach their destination shortly. At that instant, felt an unusual presence and a message materialized in front of him, indicating that Target 3 had emerged. He assured his colleagues that, considering the energy fluctuations, the target was unmistakably 3. Chase sprang to his feet and instructed to take the lead as he prepared to set off. Upon receiving the report about Target 3, the Bureau team quickly hopped onto a motorcycle equipped with a sidecar and took off. Fan found himself engulfed in confusion as he watched them leave. He sprinted after them, shouting for them to halt while pondering what would become of him, but they had vanished without a trace. He stood beside his rented bicycle, abandoned in solitude. The team reached a different crime scene. The agent with spiky hair vented his irritation about his constant tardiness by striking a tree with his fist. Chase observed the victim sprawled on the ground, noting how elusive Criminal 3 was. The way the criminal struck and then vanished in an instant made capturing him a challenging task. Concern etched itself onto Chase's face as he contemplated the possibility that if they failed to anticipate the next strike, more innocent lives could be lost. The latest victim, a woman who had suffered a vicious assault, prompted his colleague to label the attacker a psychopath. Chase rested a reassuring hand on shoulder, conveying his confidence that they would indeed apprehend the criminal, regardless of whether he was as elusive as a ghost. Abruptly felt the presence of Fan and informed his teammates that the young man they had encountered earlier was approaching. One of the agents questioned the reason for Fan's pursuit and voiced his worry that the young man might come across Target 3. Nearby the Shilly Street water reservoir, a couple delighted in their evening together, oblivious to the crows that were busily pecking at a corpse not far away. In a tender moment, the man turned to his girlfriend and inquired whether she would be willing to return to this place with him in the future. She responded that she would follow him anywhere, and then their lips met in a kiss. In that instant, Fan sped by them on his bicycle. Their irritation prompted them to label him as a solitary, single dog. The man proposed that they find a spot by the water to sit down. As they strolled along, Fan approached them once more, offering a word of caution to be careful. Fan came to a halt right in front of them. With a terrifying expression, he started to caution them. He explained that the area was known to be haunted by spirits, and shared unsettling stories of bodies discovered in that very spot. The couple exchanged skeptical glances, with the man questioning why he had never heard of any deaths occurring in that place. Meanwhile, the girl chimed in, suggesting that if such an event had indeed taken place, it would have certainly made the news. Fan questioned their trust in him, and then vividly recounted the gruesome details of the body that had been discovered, describing how it was brutally dismembered and its insides ripped out. He remarked that beautiful young women were the preferred targets of these ghosts. The couple found themselves horrified by the exceptionally savage way the killers operated. The chilling tale left them thoroughly frightened. The man attempted to appear courageous as he insulted Fan, labeling him a madman and inquiring if he believed he could intimidate him. Fan responded with a calm demeanor, explaining that he had no intention of frightening them. He was merely offering a warning. He urged them to leave the area and head home without delay. He turned away, mounted his bike, and pedaled off as the man shouted insults at him. The girl experienced a surge of fear and turned to her boyfriend, requesting that they return home. The man made an effort to mask his fear and consented, asserting that he was returning solely because she was frightened. As Fan pedaled down the street on his bike, an unexpected impulse caused him to halt abruptly. A powerful odor of blood filled the air, and with his heightened senses, the stench struck him as even more revolting than it typically would. At that moment, a piercing scream echoed from the path the couple had chosen. He became aware that the noise originated from behind him. A chilling thought flashed through his mind. Had three located those two? Upon hearing the piercing scream, Fan quickly pedaled his bike toward the origin of the noise, fully conscious of the peril that lay ahead. He recalled the details he had learned, realizing that his recently discovered powers, which granted him a modest edge over an ordinary person, were still far from sufficient to confront the formidable criminal known as Three. He reflected on the fact that he lacked any other skills that might be of assistance in this predicament. For a brief moment, he struggled to persuade himself to step back, telling himself that the couple were not decent individuals. They had spoken negatively about him, and he had already given them a warning, so it seemed illogical to put his life on the line for people he didn't know. His conscience held him back, making him curse his own indecision as he quickly took off. He cried out, expressing his deep reluctance to carry the burden of guilt. As he reached the location, a chilling scene unfolded before him. There, on the ground, a woman sat surrounded by a pool of blood, her hands pressed against her mouth in utter fear. The man lay as a lifeless, twisted body beneath the looming figure of a massive creature resembling a werewolf, which growled with a fierce anger. Fan hurried toward them, filled with concern for their well-being. However, he came to an abrupt halt as the scene came into focus, and it became painfully clear to him that the man was already lifeless. Fan took hold of the woman's hand, attempting to drag her to safety in haste. However, she was so overwhelmed with fear that she couldn't get to her feet and continued to plead with him for assistance. As she made her way towards him on her hands and knees, the creature observed her intently, its bright red eyes gleaming with anticipation, poised to attack. Fan understood the seriousness of the situation. The creature lunged forward, ready to strike. Fan searched frantically for anything that could serve as a weapon. His eyes landed on a few cement bricks nearby, and he realized this was his only opportunity. He grasped a weighty chunk of brick. As the creature sprang toward the woman, Fan himself to hurl it away. In a startling turn of events, the woman who had been pleading for his assistance suddenly shoved him hard in the direction of the monster, offering an apology as she did so. She quickly rose to her feet and dashed away to ensure her own safety. Fan was suspended in midair, overwhelmed with disbelief at the betrayal he had just experienced. The woman kept running, never glancing over her shoulder, and felt no guilt about her escape. The monster emerged from the shadows, catching Fan off guard, still reeling from the sting of betrayal he had just experienced. Before he had a chance to fully understand the situation, the creature sprang toward him and drove its sharp claws into his flesh. The bureau team, positioned some distance away, suddenly sensed a powerful surge of energy. The agent with spiky hair exclaimed that he sensed it as well. They began to ponder whether Three had come back. After examining the energy source, Mo determined that while it wasn't as powerful as Three's energy, it still held a considerable strength. Without a moment's pause, shoved his colleague aside from the motorcycle's sidecar and declared his intention to drive on his own. They quickly took off to discover who was using their powers so carelessly. As Fan lay there, he felt as though his life was slipping away. Memories from his more than 20 years of existence raced through his mind, reflecting on the moments that defined him. An overwhelming sense of regret washed over him, realizing he might never get the opportunity to utilize the newfound power he had just acquired. As the monster itself to deliver the final blow, the final flickers of his determination coalesced into one bold conviction. He refused to give in. Determined not to meet his end in such a manner, Fan summoned the remnants of his strength. He swung the cement brick he was gripping and struck the monster. The impact of the strike did nothing to the creature, which responded with a furious roar. Fan felt a jolt of disbelief at how ineffective his assault had been. Before he had a chance to react, the monster unleashed a mighty punch, propelling him through the air with tremendous strength. Fan collapsed onto the ground, feeling both hurt and powerless. The character realized that the monster moved with such incredible speed that he felt completely powerless to fight back. As he hovered close to death, memories from his life, which he deemed insignificant, raced before his eyes. He reflected on how he had dedicated his life to observing superpowered beings from the comfort of his television screen. He experienced a deep sense of bitterness as he realized that just when he had the opportunity to transform his life and become like them, his existence was on the verge of being snuffed out. In a moment of deep despair, he questioned whether this truly marked the end of his journey. In that instant of sheer rebellion, a resolute smile appeared on his lips. He resolved that if he were to meet his end, he would ensure the monster experienced suffering as well. In a swift surge of determination, he drove his hand deep into the creature's shoulder, eliciting a pained howl from the beast. The creature hurled Fan to the earth, its cries of pain echoing around them. Fan collapsed onto the ground, struggling to catch his breath. The blood of the monster, which smeared Fan's hand, started to trickle into the opening, carrying it into the realm that existed within him. Transformations started to take place among the inhabitants of that world. Fan was taken by surprise, as an intense heat surged through his body from within. His injuries started to mend at a remarkable speed. The creature seized the moment and sprang toward him once more. Startled, he realized that Fan had vanished from his original position and had unexpectedly reappeared behind him, inquiring if he had been searching for him. He rose to his feet, vibrant and full of life, enveloped in a glowing green light. With determination, he declared to the monster that the moment for vengeance had arrived. The monster lunged once more, but Fan evaded the strike with incredible agility. He swiftly positioned himself behind the creature and remarked that it was far too slow. He then asked calmly whether that was everything he possessed. He announced that it was finally his turn. The character initiated a powerful response, striking back with determination. At that moment, the members of the Bureau team detected another surge of energy. Observed that this latest wave matched the intensity of 3's energy, and it might even surpass it. His colleague was taken aback, questioning whether Fan had confronted 3 and initiated a brawl. Meanwhile, Chase shouted, commanding everyone to act without delay. In the midst of the chaotic battle, Fan gazed down at the vanquished creature beneath him. A wave of bitterness washed over him as he contemplated the fact that the woman he had rescued had not even thought to contact the authorities for assistance. He gazed at the blood that stained his body and pondered how he had managed to survive despite the significant loss. Yet, his body had reached its limit, and he crumpled to the ground, unconscious, landing in a pool of rainwater. As Fan fell into unconsciousness, the first sensation that reached him was the sound of someone calling his name, leading him to believe that he had been saved. A police officer discovered him and repeatedly attempted to rouse him, inquiring about his well-being. The officer started to understand the gravity of the situation, as it became evident that the man was affiliated with the Supernatural Investigation Bureau. After a brief period, the team from the Investigation Bureau, directed by Chase, reached the location and inquired with the police officer about the events that had unfolded. The officer responded, expressing his uncertainty, and explained that he had discovered Fan lying on the ground, unconscious. He gestured towards the frightened woman huddled beneath a tree, and revealed that she was the one who had contacted the police. Surveyed the surroundings and informed Chase that he could no longer detect the presence of 3. However, he still perceived traces of intense energy fluctuations lingering in the vicinity. Chase watched as Fan was lifted onto a stretcher by the paramedics, pondering whether the strange energy had originated from him. In the hospital, Fan reclined on a bed as the agents gathered outside to talk about his condition. The agent with spiky hair showed his surprise at Fan's unexpected survival. He remarked in a chilling tone that with Fan's entry into the bureau, he needed to be ready to make sacrifices at any moment, even if it meant risking his life. Nodded in agreement, expressing that if he were to perish, he would be remembered as a hero. This statement left their colleague astounded. Chase nodded in agreement, confirming the accuracy of his statement. Before a nurse reprimanded him for smoking within the hospital, he quickly offered his apologies. The agents shifted their focus back to the case at hand, and one of them inquired about the testimony given by the girl who had survived. Expressed that she was so overwhelmed with shock that nothing registered in her mind. His colleague struggled to accept the situation, questioning how she had missed Fan's heroic act of saving her. However, maintained that the shock had overwhelmed her. Fan feigned sleep as he eavesdropped on their conversation, a surge of anger boiling within him. He had put his life on the line to save her, yet she seemed to have completely forgotten. The agent with spiky hair turned to Chase, inquiring about his thoughts on Fan. Chase expressed his belief that the young man lacked the necessary qualities. Then, in a fit of frustration, he kicked the bed. He was asked to explain the reasoning behind his opinion. Chase erupted with fury, pointing out that Fan was incapable of defeating even a C-class monster. He insisted that if Fan had encountered the true three, he would have been dead in an instant, with no opportunity to discover how to save others. With a piercing gaze, he questioned whether Fan's life held any value to him at all. Remarked that Fan would not be alive if it hadn't been for the intervention of an enigmatic individual, sparking the curiosity of Fan, who was secretly awake. Suddenly understood that Fan was only pretending to be asleep. In a burst of frustration, he kicked the side of the bed and commanded him to stop the act. Fan rose to his feet in a fit of anger, exclaiming that it didn't matter to him at all that he had saved someone. The colleague felt a surge of happiness upon seeing him finally awake and hurried over to his side. The character embraced him firmly, conveying his joy at his survival. Fan voiced his frustrations about the weight of his colleague. The individual then slapped Fan's back with such force that it caused him to cough up blood. Fan found himself accusing his colleague of attempting to take his life, while the colleague insisted it had merely been a gentle tap. Chase stepped in at last, determined to put a stop to the disorder. As Fan slowly came to his senses, he noticed Chase gripping his shirt with frustration. Chase's voice was filled with rage as he shouted that was on the brink of death, insisting that if it hadn't been for the actions of a mysterious stranger, would have already met his end instead of lying in a hospital bed. Chase persisted in his admonishments, emphasizing that the Supernatural Investigation Bureau was not a place for the dead, and firmly stating that he would not permit him to throw his life away for no reason. Confronted by the intense anger directed at him, Fan realized he had no option but to acknowledge that he grasped the lesson. Once the agents departed, Fan found himself alone in his room, overwhelmed by disbelief. Suddenly, he bolted upright in his bed, a significant realization striking him. He pondered whether there was no financial reward for defeating monsters and felt frustrated that, despite putting his life on the line to vanquish one, the recognition had been given to someone else. The frustration washed over him as he realized that not only had he missed out on the reward, but he was also forced to keep the entire incident to himself. He came to the troubling realization that if the Bureau discovered he was the enigmatic figure, both his true identity and the secret behind the black light would be exposed. As he pondered these thoughts, it suddenly struck him that he had taken in the monster's cells, leading him to realize that his inner world had likely transformed. Fan stepped into his internal world, and a wave of astonishment washed over him. The insects he had once consumed had a transformation. Strange, shadowy beings had emerged, creating an entirely new ecological chain. He observed that these unfamiliar beings continued to reproduce through the process of division. He pondered the possibility of using mammalian cells to create various species, but soon dismissed the notion, understanding that it would enhance their intelligence and pose too significant a risk. Uncertain about what the future held for this world, He resolved that carefully bringing forth new forms of life could prove to be a beneficial choice. As he opened his eyes in the hospital, he noticed a tiny note that a nurse had left for him, complete with her phone number written on it. He disregarded it completely and tossed it out of the window. At that moment, a sleek red sports car came to a stop outside the hospital, drawing a crowd of fans and reporters who eagerly chanted the name. A stunning woman stepped out of the car, and a swarm of reporters quickly surrounded her, eager to inquire about the purpose of her hospital visit and the nature of her connection to the patient she had come to see. She responded with a sense of calm and assurance, explaining that she had come to see a friend named Fan. Her response sparked a significant reaction from both the fans and the reporters. Her fans viewed her as the most extraordinary creation crafted by God. She informed them that she had come to see a friend. As some people speculated with a sense of sadness, they questioned whether this friend held a deeper connection as her lover. The bodyguards firmly rejected the idea, asserting that no man alive could ever be deemed worthy of her. The word traveled swiftly throughout the hospital. The nurses couldn't hide their excitement when they observed her making her way toward their department. Fan listened to the noise coming from outside and found himself curious about where it was coming from. The nurses hurriedly made their way to catch a glimpse of their idol. Fan struggled to recall the identity of the person standing before him. In an instant, memories flooded back to him. He recalled the name Su, a figure famously celebrated as the goddess of Asia. Fan came to the realization that the renowned guest was none other than the goddess of Asia. He dismissed the thought as irrelevant to him and settled back into the comfort of his bed. He quickly became aware of the sound of footsteps getting closer. The door to his room swung open, allowing Su to step inside. As she walked in, the nurses in the hallway were immediately captivated, their whispers filling the air as they speculated about the young man who, in their eyes, seemed unworthy of a visit from someone of her stature. Fan caught the sound of their hushed voices and was filled with irritation. Seeking to evade the uncomfortable situation, Fan acted as if he did not recognize her. He coolly inquired whether she had mistakenly entered the wrong room and expressed uncertainty about knowing her at all. She gently reassured him that he was exactly the person she had been searching for. The nurses felt a surge of anger at his response, deeming him worthless for his ignorance of the nation's goddess. Su commanded her 2 bodyguards to exit, and they promptly obeyed her order. Once they departed, the nurses were overwhelmed with emotion, tears streaming down their faces as they pondered sadly why their cherished star had chosen to visit someone else instead of them. As she ran her fingers through her hair, a smile spread across her face. Fan experienced an unusual jolt when a fleeting image of her smile beside Chase flashed in his mind, prompting him to cry out for her to halt. He leaped off his bed, curiosity sparking in his eyes as he inquired about her identity and the reason behind their peculiar gaze directed at him. She walked up to him with a serene demeanor and leaned in to softly reveal that she was a follower of Lee, the true identity of Officer Chase. Fan quickly understood that she was a spirit. She requested that he keep those words to himself. She perched on the edge of his bed and shared the intriguing news that the newcomer had single-handedly defeated a monster on his very first day. She wrapped her arm around him and remarked on his bravery for taking such a bold step despite his limited strength. Fan expressed his worries to her, questioning whether she wasn't anxious about a potential media scandal, particularly with reporters waiting outside. However, she chose to disregard his concerns. She leaned closer and pressed her lips against his cheek, leaving behind a bright lipstick imprint. He informed him that this was his reward. Fan felt a wave of astonishment wash over him as he came to the realization that this moment marked his very first kiss. Moments later, Su exited the room to the enthusiastic applause of the nurses. As the reporters prepared their cameras to capture her image, excitement filled the air. Amidst the turmoil, Fan seized the opportunity to slip away from the hospital and signaled for a taxi. Inside the car, he remained in a daze, struggling to come to terms with what had just happened. He couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that he had been kissed against his will. As he pondered her words, a troubling thought crossed his mind. If she truly worked under Lee, then his leader was in a precarious situation. At the headquarters of the Investigation Bureau, Chase was focused on a tracking device when, unexpectedly, it burst into flames and detonated in his grasp. His two colleagues hurried over to him, inquiring whether the target had managed to escape. Chase expressed his uncertainty about how it had managed to break free. The trio found themselves in a room filled with massive containment capsules, and it dawned on them that they were confronting a significant dilemma. At the headquarters of the Investigation Bureau, detailed that while the escape spirit had the potential to inflict harm and even take lives, its skills in direct combat were quite limited. Chase explained that the most perilous aspect of the case was identifying the person who had compromised the containment vessel, leading to the spirit's escape. Chase pointed out that their fellow colleague, brother, had been the one to seal the spirit 3 years earlier in the district. Their colleague boasted about his triumph, claiming he was the one who had managed to tame a snake spirit from the Ming dynasty with just one hand, while others had tried and failed. Chase cut in, asserting that he hadn't even been present. Chase voiced his worries, believing that if the perpetrator was someone from within, it would create a significant issue. Acknowledged that, apart from Fan, only 5 other individuals were aware of this location. The 3 of them were gathered in a room filled with ancient containment vessels, and Chase found himself pondering whether those individuals were the ones accountable for the incident. Fan sat in the back of a taxi, slowly rousing from a troubling dream that had been filled with terrifying monsters launching an attack on him. He found himself unable to evade the incoming attack. The driver informed him that they had reached their destination, and in that moment, he came to the startling realization that it had all been nothing more than a dream. Fan stepped out in front of a weathered orphanage. The moment Fan pressed the doorbell, a woman appeared on the screen and started to ask him who he was. Fan appeared on the screen and introduced himself. He shared that he had been invited by Miss and expressed curiosity about whether she had let them know about his arrival beforehand. Fan felt a wave of astonishment wash over him as the woman informed him that Miss did not live at that address. He started to sense that she had tricked him. He recalled Sue's caution about a looming threat at the Investigation Bureau, where Chase's life could be at risk. Worried about the situation and short on funds, he concluded that he needed to step in some way. He made the decision to go back to the noodle shop, intending to use the remaining time and money he had. Out of nowhere, a car raced towards him, barely missing him and igniting a surge of anger at the close call he had just experienced. The car finally came to a halt, and a young man stepped out, accompanied by 2 girls. The girl turned to her friend Lily, inquiring if she recognized the man. Lily, taken aback, responded that she had no idea who that uncle was and couldn't understand why she should. Fan informed the group that he had come to discuss an issue related to their guardian. However, one of the girls retorted with a sneer, claiming that no adult resided in their home. In response, he gazed at them in astonishment and inquired whether they were all orphans. The girl felt a surge of anger, convinced that he was ridiculing them with his remarks. The boy who was with them suddenly recalled a detail and recognized that Fan was the individual whom Miss Su had sent to their group. When Fan revealed that he had received an invitation from Miss Su, Matron Ma's face lit up with delight. Lily made a point to introduce herself to Wen Lan and the matron, Ma. Fan inquired about the name of the boy who was sitting with them. Lily responded that she couldn't recall his name, but proposed that they refer to him as 4 Eyes. Fan observed that the 2 girls radiated an unusual energy. Following the incident, Lily reprimanded him for wearing the slippers that belonged to her friend. Lily observed the flush of embarrassment on Wen Lan's face due to Fan's actions, prompting her to strike him in response. Lily erupted with fury towards Fan, berating him for his disrespectful behavior and cautioning him to keep his distance from their room in the future. And Lily sat down to tally their savings, only to discover they were short by $40,000. Confronted with the challenging situation, Lily eagerly proposed that they should make some money by taking up bounty hunting. Assessed the circumstances, and realized that their sole way to swiftly gather the necessary amount was to take down a level 3 ghost. Lily came to the realization that there was a solution they had yet to explore. Jing felt a sense of admiration for Fan, recognizing that it had been years since anyone had been welcomed as an official member of the Investigation Bureau. Fan attempted to downplay his importance, but Jing was determined to address him as Big Brother. He informed that Miss Su had sent something for him. He presented a high school acceptance letter to Fan, leaving him in disbelief especially since he was already 24 years old. Jing clarified that every member of the Bureau required a disguise to protect their secret identities, and he designated Fan's new persona as that of a high school student. Fan felt a wave of astonishment wash over him when he discovered that, held an official position within the Bureau. As Fan stood there, Lily suddenly showed up, insisting that he give her all his money. Fan declined her request, wondering what could possibly justify such haughty behavior. She suggested that he think of it as a loan. He declined once more, emphasizing that their lack of a strong relationship made it unjustifiable. Wen Lan stepped in, emphasizing the significance of the situation. She informed him that their classmate's father was heavily burdened by gambling debts, and if they didn't settle it by the end of the day, the stall that provided their sole means of support would be lost. Fan turned her back on the requests, offering nothing but a frosty rejection to the pleas for assistance. Lily felt a surge of anger as she listened to the assertion that gambling addicts never regret their choices. She turned to him, her voice filled with indignation, and accused him of being unfit to be part of the investigation bureau. She grasped his hand and walked away, confidently stating that they would tackle the issue on their own without any assistance from others. After departing, Jing pleaded with Fan for assistance. He disclosed a perilous secret to Fan, explaining that Lily possessed a power equal to that of their leader, Chase. However, she remained at the orphanage, unable to harness her abilities. Upon recognizing the gravity of the situation, Fan let out a deep sigh and remarked on the impulsiveness of today's youth. However, he resolved that he could no longer overlook the issue at hand. As prepared to accompany him, Fan intervened, insisting that he would go by himself. He reasoned that the gambling dens were controlled by powerful figures and that it was necessary for someone to remain behind to handle the situation. As Fan strolled through the quiet streets, his mind wandered to a remarkable discovery he had stumbled upon during his previous visit to his small, hidden world. He came to the understanding that, while ghost cells and various biological cells could exist together within him, they did not genuinely combine, and the ghost genes typically remained inactive. Upon awakening, he found himself capable of transforming into a second form. The form he now relied on in battle was the fighting ghost, his ultimate strategy. The ghost body gene was wild and unruly, in stark contrast to the serene nature of calm spirits. He understood that such overwhelming fighting strength was not meant to be directed at common criminals, such as loan sharks.